For Churchill, his daily routine was sacred. It was the only way the British Prime Minister could work effectively. Heavy drinking, taking baths, and lengthy meals were by no means idle habits, but absolutely necessary routines that allowed Churchill to function at the peak of his mental abilities. Forget about a healthy breakfast and exercise. Churchill knew a far more effective recipe for productivity. When the then unknown journalist and writer Paul Johnson asked Winston Churchill what the secret of his success was, the politician replied that it was, first and foremost, conserving energy. Never stand when you can sit, never sit when you can lie down. This is how Churchill succinctly described the rule he had, without exaggeration, adhered to for most of his conscious life. The legendary British Prime Minister, one of the greatest figures in the country's history, became associated with a certain image, a corpulent man with a glass in hand and a cigar in his teeth. Churchill's eccentric mannerisms and habits were well known, both to the public and to his inner circle, including his staff. The politician didn't deny his proclivities. Moreover, he strived in every way to match his image. Churchill's capacity for work and productivity were incredibly high. In addition to conducting state affairs, he found time for writing and even received the Nobel Prize in Literature, surpassing Hemingway in 1953. Moreover, the politician devoted hours to his favorite hobby, painting. Over his lifetime, he created more than 500 canvases. And all of this without stepping away from his main work, the labor of his life, politics. Naturally, during the war years, the duties of Prime Minister consumed virtually all his time. Churchill strived to work in such a way as to, in his own words, fit 2 or at least 1.5 working days into a single day. And he succeeded in this, not least thanks to the schedule he developed for himself.
Churchill's day typically began around 7:38 in the morning. He consumed breakfast, usually consisting of toast, jam, and eggs, without leaving his bed, and read the morning press and correspondence in the same place. A special wooden stand was constructed for Winston so he could write and read comfortably in a semi-reclined position. At the same time, he gave instructions to his secretaries, who had grown accustomed to seeing their boss every morning in a dressing gown. Around 11 a.m., Churchill would finally get out of bed and have his first serving of whiskey and soda. Sometimes he would take a walk in the garden during the pre-lunch hours, occasionally work on historical writings, and during the war years, attend government meetings and sessions.
By noon, a bath had to be ready. It was there that inspiration often descended upon Churchill. He would dictate speeches to his secretaries through the closed door while soaking in warm water. At the same time, the minister would shave. At 1 o'clock, lunch was served. This was not merely a meal lasting about 2 hours and consisting of 3 courses, but also socializing. The family would come down for lunch, and several guests often joined. Those gathered were offered wines, while Churchill himself preferred champagne, his favorite brand being Pol Roger. He would usually keep 1 bottle next to his own glass to refill as needed.
Legends circulated about the politician's drinking capacity, and not without reason. President Franklin Roosevelt's administration, for example, coined the term Winston hours, referring to the time Churchill spent with their head of state. Roosevelt, not being as hardy a drinker, would give up much earlier than the British Prime Minister. After Winston hours, he required 3 days of sleeping 10 hours a night to recover, an unprecedented luxury for a president. When 25-year-old Winston was sent to cover the Anglo-Boer War as a correspondent in 1899, he took with him to the front 36 bottles of wine, 18 bottles of Scotch whiskey, and 6 bottles of vintage brandy.
Later, Churchill acquired a personal cabinet where he stored his supplies, a huge quantity of whiskey, Bordeaux, and port. Wine merchants valued Winston. His bill to one of them in 1936 amounted to a sum equivalent to $75,000 in today's money. He himself said that he had taken far more from alcohol than it had taken from him. As for particular food preferences, Churchill adored soup. This dish was invariably served at lunch or dinner in his house. One of his favorites was turtle soup, not as rare in those years as it is now. Heinz even produced it in cans. Another of Churchill's weaknesses was broth, a cup of which he would invariably drink before bed, even if he had just eaten a hearty dinner at a fine restaurant.
Lunch ended around 3:30 p.m., after which Churchill would either return to his office to work or play cards with his wife Clementine. The most important part of the day came around 5 p.m., when the politician would lie down for a nap. Sleep in the middle of the day was vitally necessary. It helped break one long day into two shorter ones and gave Churchill a boost of strength and energy to continue working in the evening. Winston took this process with utmost seriousness. He would always get into bed having removed all his clothes. The nap lasted an hour and a half to 2 hours. He allegedly acquired this habit in Cuba during his years working as a journalist.
Waking up at 6:30 p.m., Churchill would take his second bath of the day and dress for dinner, which began around 8 p.m. This was the most important meal, accompanied by long conversations at the table, drinking and smoking breaks. At dinner, the minister was again served champagne, while other guests received white and red wine of the highest quality. Churchill invariably smoked his cigar at the table. Winston would often sit up with guests and family past midnight, after which the politician would return to his office to work some more. Thanks to his daytime nap, he could sit at his desk until 3 to 4 a.m. and only then go to bed, to wake up at 7:30 and repeat the same familiar and beloved routine. The schedule and regimen not only helped Churchill maintain high productivity, but were also meant to support his mental health. As is known, the politician suffered from depression, which he called his black dog.